Our thanks to the Kyles for sharing that beautiful space with us. And now we're going to be talking about winter wildlife with Lynne and Jim Weber. Thank you so much for being on the program. You have created a wonderful book, Nature Watch Austin, which is a great way for people who are interested in gardening with and for wildlife and just interested in the world around them to kind of plug in and learn what's happening during the course of the seasons. I'd like to start, Lynne, by asking, what was the inspiration for this book? How did it get started?
Well, you know, there's a lot of field guides out there, Tom, that really focus on different things, insects, animals, plants. And sometimes that's kind of intimidating for people, and we wanted to create something that had a little bit of everything in it. That was not only informational and an introduction to get people interested in nature, but to really open their eyes to what's around them.
Right, kind of a primer in a way, whet their appetite for diving in deeper in a very real sense.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, one of the things we did is we included scientific names of things simply for that purpose. People could go to other resources, the web, books, libraries, and learn more if they really were interested. It
has an interesting arrangement or organization. It goes by the calendar.
Right. We decided to arrange it by what you could see during each month during the year. So each chapter is a month, and we have 4 different topics per chapter that are indicators of things you could see around Austin if you just go out and spend a little time looking.
Well, you know, to me, the greatest joy of gardening is the visitors. All the different wildlife that comes in. The birds in particular are my favorites, but the butterflies, you name it. We have a rich assortment of different things that visit our gardens. And I think during the wintertime, I especially love the bird life. We get lots of interesting visitors. And, you know, here we are at this time of year, it's in the dead of winter. What are some of the things we can be doing to help our feathered friends and the other visitors to the gardens?
Well, I think of 3 main things. One is to provide water and pay attention to it even when it's freezing. And animals and birds and plants, they do like moving water. That attracts them. So if you can do something to have some moving water in the yard, that's always a wonderful thing. Another thing I think is to not trim back your plants. Leave the seed heads. Leave the grasses and things for shelter and for food for animals, and not cut them down until probably late February. And then the third, which takes a little planning, is to plant things that provide food for wildlife even in the winter. Berries.
Well, berries especially, and as you mentioned, seed heads, especially on the grasses and things like that. And I think they look ornamental. You know, it's a nice way to, you know, keep some interest in the garden during the wintertime, is leave the grasses up, and they do provide shelter. And you mentioned planning for the year, and the wintertime's a good time for that, and thinking about what you can add. And actually maybe in terms of some of the hardy woody shrubs, you can actually plant them in the midwinter, no problem at all.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the visitors we're going to be seeing right now. And let's start with the birds. What are some of your favorite species?
Well, we, in the wintertime, we'll get little flocks of cedar waxwings that fly around. Usually
little flocks.
Little flocks, yeah. Usually you'll see them or hear them before you see them.
Oh yes, you always hear them first.
That little high-pitched whistle that they all make in unison as they're flying around is generally something that we'll hear and then start looking up, see where they go. But they love red berries. They like the yopon and possum haw berries. They like juniper berries.
Right.
In fact, one of the interesting things that you can learn in the book is that these birds will actually eat the berries sometimes when they're fermented, and they can actually get drunk and fall over.
I've seen a few stumbling cedar waxwings in my lifetime.
We've seen a few of those.
We're not the only species that can do that.
American robins, same way. They're a winter visitor. A lot of people up north look for them in the spring, but we have them in the winter more. And they like the juniper berries also. And we'll migrate around in little flocks around town.
And Jim's talked about what you can see. I like to think of all the other senses too, and one of the things you can hear this time of year are owls out there. And there's 2 main species of owls right now. One is the great horned owl, and they're calling to each other, getting ready to mate. They actually mate in the wintertime.
And they have the classic hoot, hoot, hoot.
They do, and
Right.
usually you hear them just before dawn, you know, and coming up from the canyons, and they're a very urban bird. As a matter of fact, watch out, they may go after your cats, so keep your cats indoors.
They're big birds.
They're big birds, and they actually are an owl that has the worst sense of smell, so they're one of the few that will actually hunt and eat skunks.
Okay, good for them.
People may like that.
To each their own, right?
Yeah, and then there's another little owl.
The little eastern screech owl we
Yeah.
have here in town,
One of my
all
favorites.
over town. They'll nest in your backyard if they find a hole in a tree or a little cavity somewhere. They're just little guys, and they'll be out calling with a little low trill to each other.
The most exotic,
too.
and then when I first heard screech owls calling in the middle of the night in central Austin, to me it sounded like a tropical monkey or something like
Yeah.
that in a tree nearby. I couldn't place it as a bird call at all. It was
Yeah.
very
Right.
strange.
They
They
have
have-
kind of this whinny call that's a kind of an odd call. Then
Yeah.
there's a little tiny soft trill. But
Yeah.
they're talking to each other this time of year also, and
Right.
thinking about raising a family.
Well, you mentioned cedar waxwings, and it reminded me one of my happiest garden memories of all time was one winter January day, looking out in the backyard and seeing waxwings moving from plant to plant, hundreds of robins and hundreds of goldfinches all at the same time.
Yeah, it's
It
fantastic.
seemed like the garden was completely alive with birds. It was just terrific. So what are some of the other things we should be on the lookout for during the wintertime? There's some migrants that pass through that are really wonderful.
Yeah, there really are. One of them is the American kestrel, and that is colloquially called the sparrowhawk.
Right.
So that's a
Beautiful
bird,
birds.
beautiful bird, and they're a small hawk that actually will prey on other birds, specifically sparrows, although it's not limited to that. And they're here in the wintertime. You'll see them perching on wires or posts, and normally they will sit up and look over a field or an open area looking for prey.
Now, up close, when you look at them through a binocular, one of the most beautiful,
they're
handsome
gorgeous.
birds you could ever see. Yeah.
Absolutely.
The other major type of birds that we get in the wintertime are the waterfowl. We get a lot of ducks that come down and live on Town Lake or out at Hornsby Bend or Colorado River or other areas. And we get lesser scaup and gadwalls and among
coots.
others, lots of coots, ruddy ducks, northern shovelers, in large numbers.
Yeah, very large. I've been out to Hornsby Bend with some birders before, and let me tell you, I learned a whole lot about birds I never imagined being in Austin, including shorebirds sometimes.
Yeah, that's a shorebird hotspot.
Right, just an amazing array of different visitors on that front. And, you know, the plant life of winter is alive and going as well. And in the book, one of the things that you focus in on during the wintertime are different fern species, which I found really interesting. Why ferns during the wintertime?
Well, I think, first of all, personally, I love ferns.
Yeah, me too. So I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, so that's one reason. But another reason is if you look at the life cycle of a fern, it is a very interesting, complex thing. And we talk a little bit about that in the book. They produce spores, is how they reproduce, and they do that most of the year. But we mention them in the wintertime because they're noticeable then. Everything else is either brown or dry or, you know, kind of hibernating for the winter, and the ferns are not. They're there and they're still green, and unless we get a really hard freeze, they're going to be around, and there's something beautiful and something verdant to notice in the landscape.
Yeah. I always like the woodland kind of fern, like the wood ferns. But if you go into the canyons and you look on the canyon walls, you'll see all these different kinds of ferns. They're just amazing.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I don't know if you realize this, but the Edwards Plateau region of Texas, which we're a part of, or at least on the eastern edge of, has more species of ferns than any other region in Texas except for the Trans-Pecos.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah.
The little microclimates in the
Exactly.
canyons create lots of diversity. Well, that's fascinating. Real briefly, I know that you lecture throughout and the year, and you're going to be you have a busy spring schedule.
We do.
How can people catch up with you, real quick?
Our book is published by Texas A&M University Press, and if
Okay.
you go to their website, they actually have an author events section.
Great.
And anything we have will be put there.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you making time for us. The book is terrific. Nature Watch Austin is the title. And Lynne and Jim, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for having us.
It was great. And coming up next is our friend Daphne.